What up? Today I've got the defensive part of the free agents video that we did the other day. I did offense the other day, so if you haven't seen that video, go ahead and go check it out. What I'm doing here is I'm pretty much just running through the top few players at each position and where I think they might end up as signing. So yeah, like I said, if you haven't seen the offensive video, definitely go check that one out. See where some of the players that are on your teams may land, or if they might go back and whatnot. With that said, let's go ahead and get started. First, I've got Marcus Davenport. He's coming off of a pretty rough year with the Saints. The Saints have had a lot of players get paid, and so I think he's in a weird spot. He could go back to New Orleans. I think they definitely could because other than him on the defensive line, they have I think a couple young guys that they've drafted recently, but I don't think they've been very great. But then obviously you have Cameron Jordan, who is like 34. So that's just a bad situation to be in for them. I wouldn't be shocked if Cam Jordan ended up leaving the Saints relatively soon. So with that said, they may want to bring him back so they can have somebody to cover for Cam Jordan. But at the same time, with how low he performed last year, it may be an interesting thing to just watch. Other than that, I don't have the Saints listed as a team fit, but that he could go back. It's a weird situation with how he did perform. But other than that, I have Cleveland listed. Cleveland is losing JADEVEON CLOWNEY, and rightfully so. He pretty much quit on the team. There's no reason for him to go back, so that's a pretty big hole. Yes, they do have Myles Garrett, but Cleveland in general, Marcus Davenport is a defensive end, but plays, he's kind of the either on the edge stand up guy or he can play a little bit inside like that 3 tech position. So that's would be a really good fit with Cleveland. So I think that's a possibility for sure. But then Arizona is losing J.J. Watt, and once again, kind of a defensive end stand up, but also can be down and in the middle a little bit too. There's some versatility there. Um, Arizona also could go out and get like Will Anderson or Jalen Carter with their early pick in the draft. So will they want Marcus Davenport? Maybe, maybe not. So he's just an option for them as well. And then Atlanta. Um, Atlanta, they have next to nothing on their defensive side of the ball at all. They have Grady Jarrett, and then they have AJ Terrell, but Grady Jarrett's a little older. And then AJ Terrell, he's obviously good, but it's just one corner, so it's not going to do a whole lot for you. Signing Marcus Davenport, especially if they make a push to get a guy like Lamar or somebody on the offensive side in the quarterback position, that could be really good for their defense in here to come. So, with that said, I think I'm going to have Marcus Davenport. I'm going to have him going back to the Saints. I know, like I said, I don't have him on there, but the situation they're in, they might be willing to pay a little more for him than any other team will because of his output of last year, and then also because of how he's going to be their only real staple on that defensive line for a little while here. After that, we've got JADEVEON CLOWNEY, as I just mentioned. JADEVEON CLOWNEY is going to have a lot less of a market. He came into the league as, I'm pretty sure, the first overall pick in his draft class, and he was fine to begin with. He was pretty good, but he never was like truly elite, I feel. He's had some really good seasons, but past that, it's just been a lot of bouncing around, hitting teams, and he couldn't stick around anywhere. He clearly has some attitude issues, I think, with him just quitting on a team like that, like he did with Cleveland. He just kind of packed it away and went home for the last 2 or 3 weeks of the season. So a guy like him, he may go try to cash a check and just go sign somewhere with Arizona or Atlanta to get somewhere where they may not be ready to win, but he can get paid because they don't have many people playing that position. Or he might go to a place like Kansas City and try to be a rotational guy for a team that might win something soon, and that might be his goal. So, Kansas City, obviously, they're in this position where they're going to try to find somebody to win. Frank Clark is probably going to be a cap casualty for the Chiefs. So I'm actually going to have JADEVEON CLOWNEY going to the Chiefs. I don't know what the number would look like. I think he could take a pretty sizable pay cut because of that. But, for the chance to win a title and to give them some stability on the edge, I think that's something they might take. So, you might see like him and Karlaftis being the edge for next year since they're going to probably lose Frank Clark, assuming they do at least. Next is Yannick Ngakoue. Yannick Ngakoue was pretty good this last year. I think he was a little better the year before. He went to Indianapolis, and Indianapolis is a fine spot, but He could definitely go back. They could definitely use him there. I don't believe their roster is very good on the defensive side past him. I mean, I know they have Kwity Paye, who they drafted a couple seasons back, but I don't particularly know how good he's been, honestly. Uh, but he could be another guy that goes to the Chiefs to give them a stable piece on that edge with the casualty of Frank Clark if that happens. And if he wants a little bit more money, a spot like Arizona would fit as well. Like I said before, they don't have anybody at that position right now, so that'd be something they'd be looking to. So with Yannick Ngakoue, he's he's at a good age for this, and his market's decent because of he's been consistent the last few years. So I think he'll go back to Indianapolis. They are looking like they're pretty close to being good. It's just they need to find somebody to play the quarterback position and play it well. And beyond that, I mean, they have decent weapons. They have a decent offensive line, and their defense can be good. So I think he'll go back to the Colts and help them continue to win. Brandon Graham. Yes, that last one is retirement. He's old. He's really old. This picture of him looks pretty old itself, and I think there's about the three options I have for him are he's going to retire. One, two, he goes back to Philadelphia with a team-friendly deal because he's been in Philadelphia for who knows how long, or he goes to Kansas City to just give them give them some support for cheap since they're going to be losing Frank Clark, or I expect them to. With him, he's 35 and he's played okay. The Eagles have had a really good rotation in that front seven for the last few years with him and Josh Sweat and Fletcher Cox and Javon Hargrave. So I feel like it's been easier for a guy like him who doesn't. Sorry, it's been easier for a guy like him who doesn't have, to do as much as he's got so many guys helping him around the front. That defensive line being so good. So Brandon Graham, he's tough because, I mean, like I said, he could just retire straight up. But I'm gonna have him. I think I'm gonna have him retiring this season. He is 35, and I mean, playing a defensive end position at 36 years old is pretty rough. So I'm gonna have him retire in this season. Next, we have Larry Ogunjobi. I try to start with the highest end prospect at each position first and move down, but I have Larry Ogunjobi first at the interior D line position because he kind of fits in between. He could be an interior D lineman like he was for Pittsburgh this last year, or he can be like a stand-up defensive end in like a 4-3 scheme. So, either way, he can play there, but he had a good season last year with Pittsburgh, and, I think that could definitely be a returning spot for him. The Steelers need some continuity around that position as they currently have him and Chris Wormley, who's also a free agent, and then Cam Hayward, who is a great player, but he's aging. So I definitely think Pittsburgh is a place for him to stay. I think that Pittsburgh should be looking to keep him there so they can focus on other positions in the draft this year and not have to acquire somebody so expensive. But with that said, he also could go to Kansas City and help them on their front with Frank Clark being a potential cap casualty, as I've already said. And then the Denver Broncos have some pretty big need for interior D linemen as well. They've clearly traded Bradley Chubb. They lost Von Miller in the last couple of years. Larry Ogunjobi joining the Broncos would bring a lot to their front that they haven't had for a while. So with that said, I think I'm going to give Larry Ogunjobi, I'm going to say he's going to go back to Pittsburgh. I think it's been a good fit for him the last couple of years that he's been there, and so it's something that they'll be able to pay him. Plus, they're probably going to end up cutting some people themselves, so he'll kind of fit a role that they need and something they're looking to keep for a little while more. After that, we have Daron Payne. Daron Payne, I believe today it came out that I'm recording this on February 28th, that he was going to sign a franchise tag, with the it came out today that Daron Payne is going to sign the franchise tag with the Commanders, and so he'll be staying there for this next season. If that is true, I mean, then, he'll just be back in Washington for this year, and next year he'll come out again. But yeah, he's going to be very sought after one way or another. He's not 28 years old. He's like 25. So that's wrong. Either way, the Niners could use a guy like him either way. So we'll go ahead and pass him. Javon Hargrave is the next guy. He, just like Deron Payne, had a major season this year. Deron Payne's a bit older, or Javon Hargrave's older than Deron Payne, but he's still going to be valuable. I think he had 11 and a half sacks from an interior D lineman position this year, which is absurd. So Javon Hargrave's going to go get paid somewhere. Some fits for him. He could definitely go back to Philadelphia. They need their linemen. They use two consistently. They did draft Jordan Davis, but he'd be a guy that'd be really good to bring back. I think Pittsburgh could really use him. He started his career in Pittsburgh, and they need a real nose tackle, which even a guy like Larry Ogunjobi isn't really a true nose tackle, but Hargrave can do that. I don't know if they would get both of them at once, but it's something they definitely, I believe, are going to look for if he doesn't go back to Philadelphia. And then San Francisco. San Francisco has had some issues on the interior. Their D-line. Javon Kinlaw has been okay at best. So getting an upgrade would really stabilize that front seven and give them just even more firepower than they already have. With that said, I'm going to send Javon Hargrave back to the Philadelphia Eagles. I just feel like they have enough free agents that they're going to open up enough money to bring him back, and he's going to be pretty much a center stone of their Super Bowl run for the next couple years as long as they continue winning. Fletcher Cox, another Eagle. He's just like Brandon Graham. He's 32, but I feel like he's definitely slowed down a little faster. He's definitely still been a good player. He's still been a contributor, no doubt. He's been a contributor, no doubt. But him retiring is still a definite option. Philadelphia, I believe, cut him before this season. I'm not sure if that was a mutual thing or if they cut him because they didn't want him and then he told him he would take a pay cut and all that. The market value I have for him is 10 to 15. That's because he's Fletcher Cox. But if he goes to Philadelphia, I doubt he gets anywhere close to that number. It might be around $5 million a year. But if he leaves there, I think the Chargers would be a good option. The Chargers are another team. They're trying to gear up to make a deep playoff push. They made the playoffs this year. And, they obviously have Justin Herbert and a lot of weapons with Eckler and Williams and for now Keenan Allen on that offensive side. But they really need someone on that defensive side to help them stabilize that side of the ball. Their defense was pretty rough this year. So I think the Chargers would be a good fit. And then Minnesota as well. Kind of same situation as the Chargers. Their offense has a lot of weapons, but their defense was a huge issue this year in Minnesota. Minnesota is probably in a better spot than the Chargers are, to a sense, because of the fact that their division and the conference they're in is not nearly as difficult as the Chargers. I mean, the Chargers winning the division alone will be tough because you have the Chiefs there. Now the Broncos might be something if Sean Payton can run that team correctly. So the Vikings would be a team that if they can fix their defense, they might be able to contend pretty quick because of the fact that there's not as much competition in the NFC right now. So with that said, I think Fletcher Cox is going to go to, I'm going to say the Vikings. I think the Vikings will be a good fit for him. They need that interior D lineman. And with that said, I'm going to have Fletcher Cox going to the Chargers. I think they need the interior D lineman pretty bad. And so I think that would just be a good fit for him going in there, getting a little bit more money than he's been able to make with Philadelphia in the last couple years. And also, it'll give him just kind of a new start for the last few years of his career. After that, we have DALVIN Tomlinson. Obviously, he's the interior D lineman for the Vikings. They need to bring him back. I mean, he may not be as good as some of the other D linemen in this class, but he's definitely very solid. But their defense was already so bad, and if they lose DALVIN Tomlinson, they're going to be way worse, unless they were able to bring in Javon Hargrave or Fletcher Cox or whoever. So that's a big need for them in general. The Broncos, once again, they could be in need of a defensive tackle. The Broncos, their D-line is not that great. They obviously have traded Bradley Chubb and Von Miller, like I've said, and so that'd be a good addition there. And same with the 49ers. Javon Kinlaw's been fine. So, yeah, with that, I'm going to have DALVIN Tomlinson. Minnesota's going to pay him. I don't see a way that they get out of this free agency class without getting one of these defensive linemen. And I think it's just going to be easier for them. And it'll save them a little more money. And plus, he's a little younger than a guy like Fletcher Cox or Javon Hargrave. So He'll go back to Minnesota as well. Now we have the linebackers, and I'll go ahead and tell you there are a lot of linebackers in this class. I have, I think, 8 of them listed, so this is going to take a little bit longer. But first, we have Bobby Wagner. Bobby Wagner was obviously a cut by the Rams this year. It was a mutual agreement for them to cut him. He had a good season. I mean, I think, wowed a lot of people, honestly. I think he wasn't expected to be as good as he was. He was expected that he had taken a step back in his ability because he's 33 years old, but did not play that way. There's been a lot of rumors associating him back to Seattle, saying a homecoming would be great and to help them just shore up that defense while they get maybe another slight chance at a playoff run with Geno Smith. And then Carolina hasn't been able to nail down a middle linebacker since they lost Luke Kuechly. Luke Kuechly was a great linebacker, and just ever since then, there's just been nothing there. So he'd be a really good fit there, helping them trying to build that defense up for the last few years of his career. And then the New York Jets, if he wants to go to a place where there's probably a better chance to win than either of those places, which seems crazy, but the Jets have everything but a quarterback right now. And C.J. Mosley's probably going to end up being a cut by the Jets. And he's also, C.J. Mosley's not even as good as Bobby Wagner. So those are the 3 options I have. And I'm going to say he goes back to Seattle. I think they'll be willing to pay him a little bit more because of the storylines and him being there for the majority of his career. So I just think that'll fit well. After that, we have Lavonte David. Lavonte David is the same age, but market's a little lower. Didn't have as great of a season this year. He's definitely not a bad one, though. So, same deal with the Buccaneers. He could go back, but is there much more there? I don't know. He's been there his whole career, so that's one thing that might keep him there. He did win a ring 2 seasons ago, so that's another thing that could keep him there since he's already won one. If he's satisfied with that, then he might just want to get his last big contract of his career. The Chargers have a couple guys at middle linebacker, Drew Tranquill, and I can't think of who their other one is right now, but nothing great there. He'd be a good fit for them while they're trying to gear up for a good playoff run. And then the Panthers, same thing, as I said, for Bobby Wagner. They just haven't had any continuity at that position since Luke Kuechly left. So I think for Lavonte David, he'll end up going back to Tampa Bay. He can get paid way more there than probably anywhere else, and they'll be willing to pay that for him, I think, unless they're just trying to move and get younger with Devin White. And in that case, who knows what happens with him. But for right now, I'm going to say he goes back to Tampa Bay. Tremaine Edmunds is a really interesting player in this free agency class because he is a lot younger than these linebackers, but he's been one of the best linebackers in the league for the last few years. Definitely could return to Buffalo. They probably want him back. Him and Matt Milano have been really good for that defense of the last couple years. But other than that, I think the Chargers would be a good fit as well. And he would actually probably be their best fit, in my opinion, if they were wanting to pick up a linebacker because of the timeline they're on. They, obviously they have Justin Herbert and those other players and that, like Mike Williams, who are all around his age, 27, maybe or so at best. So getting a guy that's younger and can help their defense for a long time would be a huge add for them. But also I have Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh obviously has his brother, Terrell Edmunds. He's also a free agent. I'll cover in just a little while. But Pittsburgh, there has been some rumors of signing the both of them. Pittsburgh had picked up Miles Jack before this season, but they are losing Devin Bush this season, and I'll talk about him in a minute as well. Miles Jack was decent for them. Wasn't amazing, but he was pretty solid. So if they wanted to get a good duo there of Tremaine Edmunds and of, I just realized that is spelled so wrong. Either way, if they want to get Tremaine Edmunds and Miles Jack together, that'd be a pretty solid linebacker room, and I think that'd be pretty strong. But either way, I'm going to have him going back to Buffalo. There's no way they can let him go. They need to keep him around. I mean, if he was on the Steelers already, I would say the Steelers has no chance you can let him go. So he's a guy you just got to pay. Devin Bush, he had an interesting career in Pittsburgh, but he's more likely gone than anything else. Devin Bush, he came into the league, had a pretty solid rookie season, and then his second year, the way he started was great. I mean, he looked like he was going to be one of the best middle linebackers in the league that year. And then he tore his ACL. and missed the season, what was left of the season at least. And then his third year, he could not put it together. And this last year, he started off iffy again, kind of came around in the middle of the year, and then tailed off again towards the middle end, and ended up getting replaced in a lot of the last few games for the Steelers by Robert Spillane. So there's just no way he comes back. He's 25, and his market's not that huge because of his issues on the field. So, I mean, he might be a really good steal for somebody looking for just some depth at that middle linebacker position. Um, the Vikings, I believe they're going to end up cutting Eric Kendricks, and so that would be a really good ad for them. Getting younger, getting a guy who's just he's decent, but he may not be great, but depth at least. The Falcons, they could add him and get just some help for their defense overall. Like I said before, they don't have a whole lot working on that defense, and so that would be a pretty good ad. Titans are going to have some cap casualties as well, I believe. I think, what is his name? Rashaan Evans, he is a free agent again this year, so he is not going to end up going back, I don't think. So Devin Bush would be a good guy for them to add. Plus, there seems to be a pipeline of Pittsburgh to Tennessee. After people leave Pittsburgh, they just go down there. So I'm going to have that as an option as well. But for Devin Bush, I think a good fit for him would be in Atlanta. They have a young team. He can go there, and they can try to focus on him and put him in a defense that is growing and going to grow together, and just help them maybe in the future if they can put it all together eventually. David Long Jr. is an interesting guy as well. He's a little older than Bush, and he might be 28 by the time the season starts, but his market's the same. He's had a okay career, kind of like Bush, except not as bad on the injury issues. But he's not your typical linebacker. He's a lot better in coverage than he is anything else, and so the Titans could definitely have him back. They could bring him back, and if they do, then maybe they don't get Devin Bush. But if they don't, then that's when I think the Devin Bush option becomes essential. So then the Broncos don't have very much there in the center of the field either, so he'd be a good fit there. And then the Steelers, obviously, if they're going to lose Devin Bush and if they miss on Tremaine Edmunds and they feel like the draft isn't a place for them to go, then the linebacker position needs to be filled some way. David Long Jr. being, the coverage guy, and Miles Jack being a bit of a thumper would be great, I think. But that is not where I'm actually going to have him go. I'm going to have David Long returning to Tennessee. I think they are trying to finish their last few years of contention right now with Tannehill and the current group they have, Derrick Henry and all. And I think they can't afford to let him go as well. So he'll go back to Tennessee, in my opinion. TJ Edwards had a really good season this last year, and he's been pretty solid for the last few years. He would be an Atlanta fit as well. A bit of a better pick for them up than Devin Bush would be. And then Minnesota, if they do end up cutting Eric Kendricks, it'd be another fit for them where he's going to come in and he's going to start and he's going to be a playmaker immediately. But once again, Philadelphia, they've got to do something with this defense. And TJ Edwards he may not be a priority for them, but I feel like they should make him one of their priorities at least. But I don't think that's going to be able to happen in this offseason. So he's going to end up going to Minnesota and replacing Eric Kendricks. I think that'll be a good fit for them. They'll be wanting to upgrade that whole defensive unit this offseason, so he'll be a good start to that. Anthony Walker. Anthony Walker played for Cleveland for the last few years. Before that was in Indianapolis, and he's a decent linebacker. I don't think he's going to stand out amongst the crowd. He's a little older, not on the Devin Bush thing. The benefits of Devin Bush is the fact that he's so young. You still have room with him for some years. Anthony Walker, this might be his last bigger deal in the NFL. He's going to be looking for, $4 to $8 million, I think, and he's 28 years old, so he could be a fit for the Chargers if they're unable to bring in one of the higher end guys. Same thing with the Panthers, but those two teams, they are going to be looking to. The Panthers are trying to set up themselves for the future, and the Chargers are trying to get some more help right now. But he's an interesting guy. I think he's gonna end up going back to Cleveland. It's just they're gonna pay him, and he's gonna be, just most people would rather stay where they are anyways. So he's gonna be in that situation where he's just gonna stay. Jermaine Pratt. There were some issues with him at the end of the offseason, or the end of the postseason. I mean, he's a good player. He's not as old as some of the other ones, and there was issues with him in the playoffs whenever he was yelling at Joseph Asai, saying, why would you touch the quarterback and on. He's come out and apologized, but there's also he's had some other issues with the Bengals in terms of how much they've used him on third downs and how successful they were on third downs with and without him. So I think he's more than gone. He'd be a good fit for the Panthers as they're trying to stabilize that defense. Um, and then also the Broncos, same situation. They just don't have any depth there, and or they don't have any standout guys there. Is what I mean. And they're just both positions where they could win soon, maybe if they get things right on the offensive side. And their defensive have been pretty solid for the last couple years in terms of just being at least competitive. And so I think those are two good things. And also Minnesota, assuming they were not able to get TJ Edwards, it'd be another good option for them. So with Jermaine Pratt, I'm going to have him going to Denver. I think he'll jump over there, and Sean Payton's looking to gear up that defense so their offense can just, their offense can just do what they need to do, and their defense can take care of business, and then they'll be a really solid team after that. I mean, how many times have we seen teams that are just defensively excellent and offenses that are, they're fine, but there's no problems, but they're just not elite. But like the Rams from a few years ago, like they had an elite system, but there weren't elite quarterbacks in there, and the receivers even weren't. I'm talking about the year with Jared Goff. And or the 49ers. I mean, they obviously had Kyle Shanahan, who was a great offensive coordinator, but Jimmy Garoppolo, it was not, and like before Christian McCaffrey, it was man, I don't even remember who the running back was anymore. So there's things you can do with an elite defense and just a passable offense, and that might be something Denver's looking to do if Russell Wilson really isn't in the same shape he was before. So moving on to the cornerback room. James Bradberry has been highly talked about ever since his performance in the Super Bowl and throughout the season in general. I don't think Philadelphia is going to be able to bring him back. He's just going to be one of the guys that they're going to have to give up on. And I don't think they're going to miss him too much other than being in need of corners. He is 30, so it's just he's on the downward end of his career. But he could be a good fit for a team like Detroit. Detroit has obviously built up a lot this last season. Their defense was the main issue they had. Their offense was actually surprisingly good with Jared Goff, Amon-Ra St. Brown, DeAndre Swift, and the standout performance all season from Jamal Williams. But the defense couldn't stop anybody from scoring. I think the Lions are going to invest pretty heavily this offseason into the defensive side of the ball, and James Bradberry is going to be a target for them because of his age. He can help out that cornerback room, but they don't have to commit to him long term. And then similar for the Falcons, they're trying to gear up for the future, but he's a guy that can definitely come in and help them be decent. But they may not be looking to get the most. They're not looking necessarily to win this second, but it's just a good stepping stone piece. This is also a situation where they may target him more if they're able to bring in a guy like Lamar to Atlanta, or a quarterback in general where they're going to be a contender. Getting a guy to help that secondary out would be really beneficial for them. And then Arizona has Byron Murphy, and that's pretty much it in the secondary, corners wise. So he'd be a good fit there. They are like kind of the same. Their offense wasn't good this year, but their defense was really bad this year. So the defensive side of the ball is something they need to hit on for sure. But either way, I think he will end up in Detroit. I think it's just a good place for him to go. They're probably the closest to winning out of any of the teams that I have for him, and he can help that be a reality with that team. So Marcus Peters, he's also a good fit for the Lions. Same situation. He's older. He can just help them out with what they already have, but he doesn't have to wait around and try not to actually win. I don't think he'll end up being back in Baltimore. He's just too old, and a lot of their roster is a little older, I feel like. So I think they'll be more than okay with moving on from him. The Falcons are another option for him, and I think that is actually a really good spot for him because they don't have a whole lot there in that secondary, and assuming that the Lions are able to get James Bradberry, I don't think they double dip there at all. So that's a good one as well. And then Buffalo is kind of more interesting. I picked them because if he's looking to really just win something, Buffalo would be a really good spot for him. He wouldn't be able to get as much money as the other two teams would pay him for sure. But Buffalo had a lot of issues this year with the injuries on their secondary. Jordan Poyer missed some time. Micah Hyde missed most, if not all, of the year. DeMar Hamlin, obviously, there was the issues with him. And then Tre'Davious White's been out for most of the last 2 seasons, it seems like. And then Teron Johnson missed some hefty time as well. So Marcus Peters would just bring them another body in that room who is at least a solid player. And that's where I think he's going to land. I think Marcus Peters is going to go to Buffalo and try to just help them really get past this this speed bump they've hit and have been able to get over in terms of winning in the late part of the season, and really boost up that defense too. Jamel Dean is a younger corner, a lot heavier of a market because of his age. He's going to be targeted pretty heavily. He could go back to Tampa, but with them losing Tom Brady and a lot of their other players in terms of retirements in the last couple years, they're aging as a team. I don't see him going back. I think he'd be a good fit in Minnesota, as they are going to need a lot of help in that secondary. They had Patrick Peterson this year, and Harrison Smith's taken a hit, and I don't even know who the rest of their corners are at this moment. They have Andrew Booth. That should be a good help coming soon. But Jamel Dean is, if he went to Minnesota, that'd be a huge gain for them. They just, like I said, their defense has not been good. They have a pretty great offense, effective offense at least, but their defense couldn't stop anybody. So signing a guy like Jamel Dean would help them a lot. I think that'd be highly beneficial for them. And then the Giants. The Giants had not a whole lot in the corner either. They'd probably pay him more than the other two teams I have listed here, as they're, more needy and at the position. So I think that'd be a fit. However, for Jamel Dean, would he want to go play for the Giants? Not too sure. And then the Steelers. The Steelers have some decent room at corner. They have Cam Sutton, at least if they're hoping to bring him back. I know they have Ahkello Witherspoon and Levi Wallace for the next 2 years. And, it's a strong defense already in Pittsburgh, but adding a guy like Jamel Dean would send them to another level. He's a pretty good corner, and they have okay corners, guys who are decent, but that's about it. And they obviously have Minkah Fitzpatrick and TJ Watt and Cam Hayward, so adding Jamel Dean would make that defense, if they're not already elite, then they're elite at that point. So I think that is a good fit for him, although I think Pittsburgh ends up going corner in the draft. So I think Jamel Dean might go to Minnesota. Minnesota they're trying to win right now. They have a few years left to win with Kirk Cousins and this current roster they have. I think bringing back Dalvin Tomlinson earlier and then now getting Jamel Dean, it's going to be the best case for them to win overall. Cameron Sutton, as I just mentioned, had a good year in Pittsburgh this last year. Was, I believe, top 5 in terms of passer rating allowed in the league. And I think Pittsburgh, I have Pittsburgh, New York, and Detroit here. Detroit would probably get their hands on him if they couldn't get a guy like Bradberry. And then New York, they just need bodies there as well in that secondary. But I don't see a world where Cam Sutton gets out of Pittsburgh right now. With how effective he was for the Steelers this last season, I don't even feel a relative need to go over the other teams, because I don't see a way he doesn't go back. I think the Steelers will cut guys to get him back if they have to. He may not be the most astounding corner, but he does his job, and he does his job very well. So I think that's more than enough for them to go ahead and bring him back. Jalen Ramsey, he's obviously, I have on here, his market's different because he's a trade candidate. He's not a free agent. Jalen Ramsey is interesting for sure, and I think any of the teams I listed could take him. The Giants, the Lions, the Vikings, have them listed here. The Steelers might be interested, but the problem with him is his cap hit. So the only teams I think would really go for him are teams who have the money, but will he want to go there? I don't know, because most of the teams who have money are going to be teams that just aren't very good, like Atlanta, and I don't think he'd want to go there. But then Buffalo and Cincinnati, I'm going to go over them kind of at once, because both teams have tried to win lately, and they've, Buffalo's been to the playoffs for the last 3-4 years and gone pretty deep. And then Cincinnati obviously made the Super Bowl last year, but they both couldn't stop, get over the hump, the final last jump. So Jalen Ramsey would bring a huge boost to either of those defenses. I'm not even going to speculate on who's going to trade for him. Um, that's just too much. I think the Bills and Bengals are probably the top two targets right now. The Vikings might be doing the same thing as well for the same reasons, but I'm going to leave it at that because he's obviously on the trade market, so anything could happen. He could go to Atlanta or Chicago, whether he likes it or not. So I just really think this will be a good thing to watch, and I wanted to bring him up because he is such a big player and a well-known player, but in the situation he's in, he's not going to be on his team next year. And then starting with the free safeties, Jesse Bates has been a good safety for the last couple years. Sometimes I think he might be a little overrated, but he's a good safety. I'm not saying he's not. Just because you're overrated doesn't mean you're bad. But the Jets could you really use a guy like him. They have LaMarcus Joyner right now, and he is 32 or 33. So I don't see them keeping him around for much longer. And Jesse Bates would be a big addition as they're trying to gear up to win themselves. If they think they're just probably close to a quarterback away. Atlanta is another team. They could really go after him as well. I mean, they're going to have more money, and they just need bodies on that defense, and he'd be a huge addition for them. And then same thing with Atlanta. They do have Budda Baker, but he can, Jesse Bates, Budda Baker, both of them back there in the secondary would be pretty dirty. So I don't think that'd be a problem at all. Arizona's not necessarily in a rebuild; they're kind of just resetting. So that would be interesting for him to maybe really try and go get paid, but also win in a pretty good way as well. With that said, I'm going to have Jesse Bates going to Atlanta. Excuse me. I've seen some other rumors about him targeting Atlanta himself, and he was, I believe, spotted in public with a lot of the Atlanta Falcons players. I'm not sure who, but I've just seen the headline. So, 2 + 2 = 4. So I'm going to have that adding up right there. Jordan Poyer, he's 32. His age is going to be a problem, but I think that the Bills are going to probably want him back. I mean, he's been a huge piece of that defense for the last couple of years, and him and Micah Hyde, I mean, they weren't hardly on the field themselves, but much less together. Having them both on the field together is going to make this defense way better than it appears this last season, and so I think they should be trying to bring him back for sure. He also hinted himself at going to Miami. He's 32. This next contract he gets is more than likely his last. So he might just be wanting to go, make some money, spend his last couple years enjoying himself and just playing the game he loves. That would be a fit for Miami in that sense, where he'd go down there. They're potentially a contender. Their defense had some issues, and he would help that. But, it's Miami. Who wouldn't want to spend their last few years playing professional sports down in Miami? So there's that as well. And then Cleveland. Cleveland has John Johnson, but he's been a little bit downhill. They also, John Johnson and Jordan Poyer, definitely play in the same secondary. John Johnson, Micah Hyde, I see some similarities there. So, putting him next to him wouldn't be a problem at all. I think Jordan Poyer with his market is going to make it a little difficult for Buffalo to bring him back, but I think they'd make the moves necessary to get him back. So I'm going to have him staying in Buffalo himself. CJ Gardner-Johnson is by far one of the more polarizing players in this whole video, attitude-wise and all that, but he actually has seen some on-field and off-field maturing in this season. There's an interview about that I watched the other day. It was pretty cool, but Philadelphia is going to target him. They're going to bring him back. He's 25 years old, played an extremely major role for their defense this year, and so I think Philly is not going to try to let him go at all. But if they are not able to make an agreement with him, Detroit could be a really good place for him as well. That secondary's been iffy. They had some decent play by, I believe, Kirby Joseph, and I can't remember their other safety right now, DeShon Elliott. But Chauncey Gardner-Johnson walk in there and start immediately. Plus, it's a growing team, a team that might be able to contend soon, which is shocking to say that the Lions might contend anytime soon. But either way, you also have the Cleveland Browns, same situation as Jordan Poyer. But I really just think that Philadelphia is going to bring him back. I think over even JAVON Hargrave, over TJ Edwards, he's got to be their number one target, mainly because of his age. The age he's at. There's so much left with him, and I just think you can't risk losing him at all. You've got to keep him in house. So that's what I have for CJ Gardner-Johnson. Jimmy Ward, he's 32. he's on his last contract for sure. He was pretty decent this year, but I just don't see him doing too much more in his career. The Raiders could be using some help for their secondary. He's gonna, if he went there, that'd be a solid fit player and scheme wise. But I just, it would be a move for him to just get a bag at that point. Same thing with Atlanta. He's too old. He's not going to be around by the time they might be doing anything. It's just a bag move at that point. But then the Chargers, this is the difference. The only different option I have for that. The Chargers could sign him, and he'd be kind of just a addition next to Derwin James to try to, just really finalize the last few pieces of this team and help them win a championship this coming year or the next year after. I think he'd sign just tops a 2-year deal. I don't think a team would take him longer than that. He played well this last year, but it wasn't anything astounding. So his market's not going to be huge, but I think he'll end up going to the Chargers. Sean Elliott, as I mentioned a minute ago, played pretty well for Detroit, but will he get brought back? I don't know. I think he is a guy who might go to the Falcons or Cleveland, honestly. Either one. They're kind of in the same situation. They're Cleveland more than Atlanta is closer to winning, but both of them have major issues on their team. And, I mean, their roster seems closer to winning, but it's the Cleveland Browns for, what that's worth. So I don't know how much he'll get with that. But having said that, I really think Atlanta's just the best fit for him. Though he's young to a point. 26 ain't bad if he's not 27 by the start of the year. And so he'll be able to go to Atlanta, start immediately for sure, and help them gear up for the next few years, and they might be able to actually contend for something. So moving on, Adrian Amos, strong safety. First one of our strong safeties here. He's 30. I don't know if he'll end up going back to Green Bay. I think they're going to try to end up focusing on the offensive side of the ball with Rodgers potentially leaving, ironically. Miami could be use of him. They obviously had the kid they drafted the last 2 years who has been really good. I can't think of his name right now, but Jevon Holland, there we go. But putting him next to Jevon Holland would be great, and, it'd be a really solid duo. He's not going to make too much money, so I think that'd be a good fit for Miami in that sense. Same with Pittsburgh. If this is kind of an if scenario with Pittsburgh, but, they're going to end up losing, or a free agent at least, is Terrell Edmunds for them. If they lose Terrell Edmunds, trying to gear up to win for the next couple of years, Adrian Amos would be a good replacement for that. He's a solid safety. He may not be elite necessarily, but he's just a really solid player in general. So, yeah, and then Atlanta, not Arizona. Atlanta would be his bag location. If he's going to go on somewhere else and just try to get the money he can for the last few years, I think it'd be Atlanta. And, I don't really see him as necessarily a bag chaser. I think he's going to be a guy, since he hasn't won much yet, he's going to try to go find a place where he can win. Buffalo could be another target if they were to leave Jordan Poyer out. But with that said, I think I'm going to put him in Miami. I think that makes the most sense for him and for the team. Get a guy next to Jevon Holland, a veteran who knows what he's doing, and it's just going to be really solid in the backfield no matter what. Von Bell, he's a bit younger, but I would say probably not next as good as Adrian Amos necessarily. Miami could be a fit for him as well, assuming they don't get an Adrian Amos or something like that. But also Jacksonville. Jacksonville could use some help back there. I think they have Rayshon Jenkins, who is a little older. So moving Von Bell in would be a good move for them to help that defense out a little bit more for the next few years while they try to start contending as well. And then the Bengals. He's obviously currently on there, but I think going back to the Bengals will probably be where he goes. It's the safest bet for him. They're clearly a contender, so stay where you are. He might have another contract after this one anyways. Go try to win while you can. Get paid some while you're at it. So him staying on the Bengals makes sense. And then here's Terrell Edmunds. Terrell Edmunds, he's 26 years old and had a really good season this last year. He's not necessarily a stat sheet stuffer. He doesn't jump off the page, but he's another one of those guys who he's the definition of a role player. I mean, his market says it, but he may not be elite, and he probably won't be elite in his career, but he's going to do his job and do it very, very, very well. That's what he did this last year. a tackle machine. He doesn't miss tackles. That's one great thing about him. And he really just, every championship team needs their guys who are just going to be able to just take their job and do it. They don't need everybody to be a superstar. So Pittsburgh, I think Pittsburgh's going to try to bring him back. But other than that, Denver could use him for sure. Another, addition to their secondary potentially to try to just lock up and try to really contend the next couple years. He'd be a good fit there next to, Surtain and all them. So after that, Atlanta'd probably pay him more. He'd be kind of like I said for Devin Bush, a good addition for now and the future, a guy who can stick around for a while because they're not very old. But ultimately, Terrell Edmunds, I think he's going to stay and come back to Pittsburgh. He'll be a target for them with his age being so young. Sign him to a 4-year deal. Keep him around. Don't let him go. He's been really good with Minkah Fitzpatrick the last few years, so why would you mess that up? So yeah, with that said, that is the end of this video. Thank you for watching. If you haven't seen the offensive video yet, I really suggest you go watch that. Hit all the main free agents and the offensive side of the ball. But yeah, if you like this content, please subscribe and like all the videos. Trying to do this more often, and I'm doing viewer requests as well. So if you have any requests for videos, just let me know in the comments, and I'll be getting around to those as soon as I can. Anyway, thank you.